Three tomatoes are walking down the street. Papa tomato, mama tomato, and baby tomato.
Plain Ketchup presents.
Starring Lindsay Hinkle and Jamie Nelson.
So this is Plain Ketchup, is it? I prefer something with a little more kick.
Everybody's favorite condiment-themed entertainment podcast.
Put some hot sauce on my burrito, baby!
Hot sauce.
Nobody puts ketchup on a hot dog.
So, I've got to go to a party.
Is this how we're starting it? Wait a second. Maybe we should say hello and things.
Oh. I don't want to say hello, Jamie.
Alright, wait. Okay, wait. Hang on. I got this. And you're listening to Hot Sauce on PlainKetchupPodcast.com. I'm Jamie Nelson, and I'm here with Lindsay Hinkle, my co-host. Lindsay, how's it going? Do you have any plans for the evening?
I sure do. It's my good friend's birthday, and I have a date with a slip and slide.
A slip and slide? Isn't that for, 5-year-olds?
Yeah, but when I was 5, my mom wouldn't let me go on it, so now, obviously, I have to make some bad decisions as an adult, and I think the box says that the weight limit is only, 115 pounds.
Is there a crocodile at the end?
If you get the, name brand ones, but if you get the really cheap one at Walmart, there's no crocodile.
Well, a tarp? With a hose?
A tarp and a hose and a couple of rocks at the end to catch it.
We didn't even have rocks back when I was a kid. They just let us roll on down into the cemetery.
You should be grateful for those damn rocks. It has a weight limit on it, and at the end there's this little, pillow cushion of water and, a sprinkler kind of thing with water shooting in your face.
It's just the most unpleasant game ever. And then you go face down into some rainwater, and then they sprinkle you with some more water.
It's not rainwater unless it's raining. It's hose water.
I always thought you had to play in the rain.
What? You had a really weird slip and slide.
My slip and slide was just a tarp and some unlucky weather.
You weren't kidding about the tarp.
Hey, at least I have a hill in my backyard. And a fence.
Fences are good for catching your face. Okay, you're supposed to have an actual slip and slide that you put a hose into, and then you run and go on your tummy.
I have a confession to make.
You never had a slip and slide?
I never had a slip and slide. So that was a great story, Lindsay. Speaking of storytelling, I believe we have some kind of storyteller in our waiting room.
We sure do. We have Cory O'Brien from the blog Myths Retold.
Cool. Why don't we let him on in?
Sounds like a plan. Hi, Cory.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good.
Just fantastic.
In the Myths Retold blog, you do a lot of different types of mythology. And how did you get into mythology?
I mean, for one thing, mythology kind of gets drilled into you from an early age. I mean, I think that the reason that a lot of people like the website is because, they've heard a lot of these stories before, just kind of coming out of the ether. But also, my dad used to have a theater company, and they would do all different kinds of folk tales and myths from different cultures. It's called We Tell Stories. And so they would do a big Medusa show and shows that would cover a whole bunch of Greek myths at once, or old Japanese folk tales. So I heard a lot of those when I was little, and then I forgot a lot of them, and now I'm kind of relearning a lot of them, which is fun, and with more swears.
So which type of mythology is your favorite?
I'm pretty much equally familiar with Norse and Greek mythology, maybe more familiar with Greek mythology, and I like Norse mythology better. Just because, it's more no nonsense. All the gods know they're gonna die, and they're not quite as irresponsible. They're still ludicrously irresponsible, but they're not quite as irresponsible. Plus, Thor is a huge badass.
I know that you've also done some Shakespeare. If you ever do a retold version of King Lear, I will be super excited, personally.
King Lear was one that I was thinking about doing.
It's so funny. It's not supposed to be, but it's funny. I thought it was really funny in a really twisted way, but I thought it was supposed to be a tragedy. They always teach it it's not supposed to be a comedy. Why are you laughing, Lindsay? Stop laughing.
You don't know that it wasn't supposed to be. Shakespeare was a motherfucker. Can I say motherfucker? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's part of the other reason that I do the website is everybody treats all this shit like it's sacred, and it's not sacred at all. I mean, technically it is, a lot of it is the sacred texts of a variety of different cultures. But like, you know, when people were telling like definitely like Greek and Norse mythology and stuff to each other back in the day, they were probably laughing their asses off. Like, oh my God, then Zeus banged this other chick. How many chicks is Zeus gonna bang before he gets all banged out? Or like, you know, Shakespeare includes in his stuff all these kind of like lewd jokes. Even in like Hamlet's supposed to be a tragedy, but there's that scene where he does the play within a play, and he's talking to Ophelia, and he's just wailing on her with the sexual innuendo over there. I mean, that's what I mean when I say Shakespeare's a motherfucker. And that's the kind of thing that they like assiduously avoid teaching, and at least in high school classes. In some college classes, they'll be cool about it, but even then, everybody just takes this shit too seriously.
Is that what you're studying in school too now?
No, I'm studying creative writing.
Okay. You're going to grad school then?
Yeah.
Was your undergrad major also creative writing?
It was English creative writing.
Air 5.
Were you an English major?
No, journalism.
I kind of wanted to do journalism. Journalism or engineering?
Those are two different things, my friend.
Nah, you're oversimplifying.
How are journalism and engineering the same?
Journalism and engineering are the same because I think that writing and engineering are very similar in that, I mean, at least the part of engineering that interests me, which is problem solving. I mean, in both fields you have tools, and I also have this kind of like deterministic idea of how writing works. Like, you start out with an intention, and with that intention in mind, you pick the first word of your sentence. And then that first word in your sentence refines all the words you can put after it, both because, you know, you can't make an ungrammatical sentence, and also because there's one exactly right word to convey what you want to say next, and also you have an intention what you want to say in the sentence. So with each word that you put in, you close that field of possibilities more and more until at the end there's exactly one word that you can use to finish that sentence. So I feel like there is a kind of like calculated sort of scientific aspect to it. And in both of them, like if you're writing a story or putting together like a journalism piece and researching, or if you're building a robot, which I really like to do, you're tinkering, you know, you're putting stuff together. You're using the information that you have and the skills that you've developed to create something out of nothing.
That's like what you'd learn if you took the Bachelor of Science track for journalism.
So what interests you about storytelling?
Well, I think it's some of that same stuff about creating something out of nothing, but also I just think it's really fun. You know, I learned American Sign Language a while ago, and telling stories in American Sign Language is really, really fun because you can use your hands to like create the environment that the story is taking place in, and then you get really into it. And I don't know. I don't think there's a better way to get to know somebody than seeing them tell a story. You know, whenever I like meet somebody new or like go on a date or something, not that I go on very many dates, if like whenever I meet somebody, I, instead of like asking them what do you do, because I think that's kind of a boring question, and I've actually been to places where that's kind of taboo. Nobody asks that at all. I like to ask, what's your story? And then people usually say, what does that mean? And then I say, you know, take it however you want. And then I usually get like a really interesting story out of them. It's way more like informative to me than just finding out if they work at a Starbucks and it really sucks.
Here's my story about storytelling. I actually had a job interview a few years ago where the person interviewing me goes, tell me your story. I'm like, what, don't you want to know my strengths and weaknesses? Like, I'm prepared for that. And she's like, no, just tell me your story. I'm like, well, this one time I met Hanson, and like I told her about the time that I interviewed Hanson and met them, and somehow I ended up getting the job.
Well, that's a awesome story. Of course you got the job. You interviewed Hanson.
When people ask you what your story is, what do you tell them?
I've mainly been traveling a lot for the past couple of years and collecting other people's stories. After I got out of college, I went to college instead of going to high school. So I graduated college when I was like 18. And then after college, like I was going back and forth about a bunch of stuff to do. And I finally ended up having the choice between going to a graduate school that I didn't really want to go to or figuring out something else to do. So I didn't go to grad school. I went and I traveled around Europe for a few months. And that was really cool. And I was really, really poor. And then I came back home. I lived someplace, didn't really work out. And then I went traveling again. And I drove across the country in this vegetable oil powered car. And I had a lot of adventures. Actually, I ended up being pretty miserable. So I didn't have anybody along with me. So I got lonely. While I was doing that, I was applying for graduate schools again. And then I got into graduate schools. I got into this one in Chicago. So now I'm in Chicago, and that's my story.
What kind of stories did you collect from people?
Let's see. What's a good one? When I was in Spain, I was walking on this pilgrimage trail across Spain. It actually goes like way into Europe, but and then to the west coast of Spain. It was originally like a Catholic religious pilgrimage thing. But so I was on this trail, and every time that people heard that I was from California, I grew up in Los Angeles, they'd be like, "Oh, have you met the other guy from California?" And I'd be like, "No." And who is he? And they'd tell me he was this guy named Dante. He was kind of like a religious nut, and some people were really creeped out by him. He paid for his stays in the hostels by sharpening knives, and they saw the hostel guy yelling at him once. But everybody was asking me if I'd met this guy. And eventually, I got pretty homesick. I got kind of lonely because, I could speak Spanish, and there were some people who spoke English, but nobody who spoke English with like an American accent for months and months. So I decided I had to find this guy. And I was walking and walking to try and catch up with him. One day, because I set this walking schedule for myself to try and bridge the gap between us. He seemed to be like 2 or 3 days ahead. And I would ask after him every time I went through someplace, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Dante was here 2 days ago," or whatever. And but finally, this one day, I was trying to make it far enough to keep with my schedule to catch up with him, but I was just so tired, and it started raining, and I was passing a hostel, so I was like, "All right, I'll just go in here." And the guy ended up, I didn't have any money, so the hostel guy ended up giving me a place to stay for free in exchange for washing the dishes. And then I was in the bunks talking to one of my friends who I just found at that hostel. And he was telling me a story about how a guy tried to molest him in Leon. And then I was telling him the story about how I was trying to catch up with Dante and saying, now I'm never going to catch up with him because I really needed to make it a couple more miles today. And I hear the hostel owner bringing somebody into the bunks. He's saying, you'll probably be surprised by this coming from California, is the little snippet of conversation that I heard. And I'm like, wait, California? And the hostel owner leads this guy into the room, and he's got this big square gray beard and these kind of crazy eyes. And he comes in, and I look at him and I say, "Dante?" And he looks over at me and he says, "Yes." And I say, "I've been looking for you." And he just kind of looks up and he goes, "God knows." And then he ended up telling me his story, which was that he had been on a pilgrimage for like 10 years. He went all over the United States, and he went to Mexico, and he lived there for a while. And then he flew to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem he went to London, and then he hitchhiked down and ended up on this pilgrimage trail. And he had all kinds of crazy stuff with him. He had like a harp that somebody had built a resonance box for and stuff. And what I ended up learning is that he had a family. He had joined a sect of Christianity that was more lax than the one that he'd grown up with, and he ended up getting a woman pregnant by mistake and marrying her. And then he decided that she was trying to manipulate him with the child, and that God didn't want them to be together. And so he left her. He received a vision from God. He was despairing, and he got hit by this holy energy, and he didn't need to blink for hours and hours, and he was reading the Bible, understanding things in a way that he'd never understood it before. And the first thing that he read was about a prophet undergoing the exact same thing that he was doing. And then he slept, and he had this prophetic dream about the place that he was going to end up living, and then he ended up living there, and finally decided that he needed to go on this pilgrimage, and hadn't seen his wife and kid in years and years. And so right before we parted ways, he gave me the contact information of his son. and asked me when I got back to California to go see him and tell him that his dad was okay. And so I got in touch with them, and I ended up talking. The son didn't want to talk to me. He didn't want to have anything to do with his dad because his dad walked out on him. But I ended up talking to his ex-wife, and she was telling me how crazy Dante became. Like, you know, he wasn't like that when they got married, but he would do things like he considered underoos, you know, like the underwear with the cartoon characters on it. He considered that to be idol worship. And so he would cut them all up. He would just take them from his kid and cut them all up and put them in trash bags and haul them out of the house and stuff like that. He was a crazy man. And he left his family. So I ended up seeing them, and had an opportunity to convince his son not to join the army, which hopefully worked out. And I haven't seen them since. So that's my favorite story.
It's a really good story.
How are you doing with your party?
Okay, so here's my story. Part of the reason that this party was so appealing is that there's a slip and slide, right?
Oh, goodness.
And when I was a kid, my mom would not let me go on slip and slides because she was convinced that I was going to break my neck and either die or paralyze myself. Which I was a clumsy kid, and I'm still a clumsy adult, and it's not completely out of the question. So I was just like, I really want to go on a slip and slide before I die. She asked me, she's like, so what are you doing this weekend, Lindsay? I'm like, I'm going to go to this party, and there's going to be a slip and slide. And she's like, you have to promise that you won't kill yourself or die. And I'm like, I promise I won't break my neck on a slip and slide when I'm 24 years old. Have you ever been on a slip and slide?
Yeah.
Are they fun?
Yeah.
Did you break your neck?
That's a tricky question.
Are you as clumsy as I am?
I probably used to be, but then I taught myself how to juggle, so I wouldn't be.
No one told me that juggling would help. Obviously, there is the like old storytelling. There's the myths and stuff that we all know. There's the works of literature that have been passed through generations, and then there's the oral storytelling. Do you think there's modern storytelling in popular culture at all?
I don't think that there's any kind of division between the kind of story that I'm telling and the kind of story that, you know, guys around a campfire used to tell each other hundreds and hundreds of years ago, or the stories that are being told now. I mean, one of my friends brought this to my attention about the Iliad. There's a part in the Iliad that any sane person will skip over because it's boring as hell, which is like, I think it's like book 2, which is just listing everybody who showed up to that goddamn war. Everybody. And it just goes on for pages and pages and pages. People who you're never going to hear about again, like legitimately are never mentioned in the book again. What my friend pointed out to me is the point of that was this was being read aloud and recited in a big mead hall full of dudes who descended from all of those people in that book. So the idea was like, oh man, they're coming up to Gilnar the Great. Oh, Gilnar the Great, so amazing. You know, you yell for your guy. Like there's things that are designed to be performed out loud, and they're risen out of, like, you know, just some people talking to each other. It's like, oh man, I got this great story, let me tell you. And I think we're doing the same now. I think, you know, in 1,000 years, maybe something that somebody's telling you on the street, or, you know, some kind of, maybe like Scientology stories are going to be considered mythology. We do have modern storytelling and modern mythology too. Like, just look at, for example, all of the rumors that are just kind of part of your consciousness about the presidents. You know, like George Washington and Cherry Tree, or Abraham Lincoln and the debate and all that stuff. Like, our presidents are mythological characters. We as Americans don't have like an ancient religious tradition to harken back to as an entire nation. We just have those presidents, and so they've kind of been made into deities. I mean, obviously storytelling is just in every culture across the world. Is that part of what kind of drew you to it, or that's just, it's part of humanity almost? Yeah, I think it is. People think in stories. That's why, you know, even in the sciences, you're talking about something like water pressure or gravity. A lot of times you'll hear the word want, you know, like the object wants to fall, or water wants to get into this room here. You know, we personify things and we give them motivation so that we can tell stories about them.
Do you have a new project that you're working on?
Pretty much just my website. You guys should go to my website. It's bettermyths.blogspot.com. Now I feel like a whore. There you go.
I will provide a link on our website to your website.
Awesome. I love links.
So, Cory, thank you for taking time to chat with me today.
Thank you for taking time to chat with me today.
Well, now you're just copying what I'm saying.
Well, now you're just copying what I'm saying.
I'm so confused.